Could somebody translate the nerd speak, please?
It's simple. We need to build a time machine.
Welcome, friends. We're back at it talking Star Trek Prodigy Season 2 up to Episode 4. This is the one entitled Temporal Mechanics 101. There will be spoilers ahead. If those aren't for you, consider this your last warning. Let's crack into it. This episode kind of rectified the situation a lot more quickly than I thought they were going to. I don't necessarily mean that in a detrimental manner. I just thought they were going to be stuck in this alternate future with things kind of going sideways for several episodes dealing with the fallout and the unforeseen consequences, but they actually kind of dealt with that and moved the story forward in a possibly much more interesting way. There were a couple of things that were just a little bit too quick and a little bit too glossed over, but because of things that happened later on in the episode, I'm not even going to necessarily fault this episode for doing that. So if you remember last episode, they were trapped in this alternate future. They had possibly erased Gwyn from existence. Chakotay was able to escape with a protostar instead of it being kind of careening off, lost into Tars Lamora. Gwyn was never born because she had no need to be, all of that stuff. They thought they erased her. There was even a brief conversation with the Voyager A where it was shown that the ship Gwyn had been on, the Sacagawea, I believe it was called, was lost. Now, we saw last episode it was destroyed because Solemn wasn't having any of that stuff. But they think because of the temporal meddling in the future, she was erased from time. We actually do see that Gwyn is kind of blipping in and out of time. She's become unstuck in time, reminding me a little bit, and I know this is completely tangential and has probably no relation to this. There was an entire season-long arc in the final season of Sliders where Londo Mollari was unstuck in time. I know he was playing Dr. Oberon Geiger, the most insanely D&D type of name you could possibly come up with for a character on a TV show, but he was unstuck in dimensional sliding, so he was just kind of blipping around from world to world. It seems kind of similar to what's happening with Gwyn, kind of coupling that with a DS9 episode where O'Brien keeps kind of bouncing around in time a little bit, and that's something they utilized quite effectively in this episode. And I would like to take another side trip here just to discuss the member berries and the references and the Easter eggs, all that sort of stuff, the fan service. There's two distinct types of this, and I think the way Prodigy is doing it is the best case scenario as far as making this feel like a connected, a cohesive, a lived-in universe. So I don't really mean to call out Discovery, but that's just the very most recent example I can think of because that just wrapped up. In the very last episode, spoilers for that if you haven't seen it, they kind of revealed who Kovich was, and I'm not dinging that reveal. What I'm saying is there was some kind of elements that were shown in there, specifically like Geordi's visor, Cisco's baseball. Those were more just like, for us, the audience, like, look at this thing, you know what this is, That was less of a cohesive universe really making sense. There was no explanation for why those items would be there. Now, maybe there would have been if they had been given another season, but I digress once again. The way Prodigy is bringing things in, and the way I think it's more utilized correctly, is by actually referencing past events in Star Trek or technologies or using events that have been seen in past shows to influence the solution you're creating in this episode. So, like, there were several things in here. First of all, the Temporal Mechanics 101 actual real training program or holo novel or whatever, holo textbook, I guess you could call it, with Dr. Aaron. Really liked that sequence. I kind of am wondering if we're going to see more similar things as they learn throughout the season. That was a nice little distillation of time travel from Star Trek we've seen past. The fact that they didn't use time crystals here kind of makes me a little happy because those don't make any sort of sense whatsoever. They didn't bring in the Guardian of Forever or anything like that. They basically just said, oh, you've got Q, you've got your slingshot maneuver, and you've got your interspatial flexure, I think they called it, or temporal wormholes. Those are the three main ways that they discussed in here, aside from actually building a time machine, which is what happened. But getting back to the point I started probably 32 minutes ago, the references, the ways that they deal with the problems in this episode by coming up with some sort of a chronoton hypo spray or the little things you put on there to keep yourself in temporal sync, those were shown and those were developed and those were kind of implemented in past Star Trek episodes. Like I said, that O'Brien episode from DS9, but that was a follow-on from the TNG episode where they were kind of outside of temporal sync. That was also kind of shattered from Voyager, where the Doctor developed the temporal hypospray so that Chakotay could go through all the disparate fractured timelines on that ship, which was actually nice because that's something the EMH developed in Voyager, and we see the EMH here kind of furthering that technology in this episode to keep Gwyn stuck in a synced with this current timeline. Now, it's not a forever solution. However, while she wears this armband, she is being kept in sync. That has to mean to me something's going to go awry, something is going to go haywire later on in the season, and that's going to either come off or get damaged, and she's going to fade away or get lost or get slingshotted around to some other alternate universe, or she'll get pulled forward in time, backwards in time. There is something going to go awry, something is going to go wrong with that, but that's actually adding a little ounce of fun to the proceedings because they're utilizing prior Star Trek technology we know about, but we don't know what could go wrong with this. The building of the time machine is the one thing I felt was just a little bit too glossed over. Obviously, they did it in a montage, but it felt like they did it a bit too quickly. This feels like it could have been something that would have taken them days, weeks, months. I don't really know how long it actually took them, but like I said earlier, there are things going on behind the scenes where there is some faction or some being or some cabal of people out there trying to help them, and I don't know if all of these future guys are connected. So at the very end of the episode, we get to see there is actually a future guy type person contacting Murph. Murph has had almost nothing to do this season so far. In fact, I mentioned earlier on, I don't even know how intelligent Murph is supposed to be. He seems to be getting officer training in Starfleet. He is a cadet, so he's more than just a, lower life form. He's definitely got some sort of sentience, but I don't know how high of a level of being he is. Maybe that's the reason these time people are connecting with him, because he has some sort of cross-temporal awareness or something. Again, wildly speculating, wasn't really revealed in this episode at all, but that's interesting. I don't know if this is going to tie into the future guy from Enterprise, or if this is just supposed to be like a wink wink nudge nudge to us as an audience who may have watched that, but it has no relevance to that whatsoever, just maybe utilizing the same technology. I get the feeling here that it's probably going to actually be characters we know, whether it's an older version of Dahl, whether or not it's a Chakotay from an alternate timeline. They're kind of adding in different voices and distorting them to probably keep us on our toes. So I'm wondering if it may actually be multiple characters. Also, is it possible that there is more than one faction giving them these messages? So we saw that somebody kind of helped repair the ship. That one still is a little bit wonky to me. I'm not entirely certain how someone from outside of time could repair their ship or fix their ship. I guess they could affect things in the past to make the ship not be broken in the future. So again, I don't know how that works, but there were also messages that were text-based on the screen saying save Gwyn, so I don't know if all of these people are actually the same. If you remember the trailers before the season came out, it looks like at some point there's going to be a multitude of different kind of fractured timelines with the wormhole kind of breaking off into various things. I'm wondering if maybe there are different elements trying to make their timeline become the correct one, and I'm wondering if somewhere out there some older disheveled dystopian versions of our characters are trying to keep themselves together because that is the core group and that is the only way for things to proceed correctly. Now, we were also told there's something coming out there that's probably precipitating our characters to need to be together. Specifically, I think it's probably Dahl and Gwyn, but I'm not 100% certain on that. It could be a red herring, and it could be actually referring to Chakotay and Janeway, or just the Prodigy crew as a whole. What are your thoughts? Did you like this episode? How are you finding the season so far? I know I'm kind of blasting through these, but 20 episodes in one day is a heck of a lot to do. Leave all your thoughts down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those fancy YouTube things, and until next time...
Her existence is uncertain, both always and never, proverbially trapped in Schrodinger's box.
Can you do science later?